Well, hello and welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Vicky Laffey, and I make these podcasts because I want to pass on my wealth of knowledge and experience that I've accumulated over the past 10 years of me being an entrepreneur so that I can help you launch and grow your own small business. Please remember to click subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. Well, hello everyone and welcome again to the Grow Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Vicky Laffey, and today we have the absolute pleasure of talking to mindset coach Matthew Muskeen, otherwise known as Mindset Matt on Instagram, mindset.matt. Matt is as I mentioned, a mindset coach, and he has come on today to help us talk around the mindset issues involved making this leap from employed to self-employed, which is it's brave, it's scary, it's exciting, it's all sorts of emotions and practicalities and everything sort of melded into one, really. And the mindset part of it is huge. We're often coming up with things in our heads such as, what if it fails? That's the biggest one that I often find. So, but we're going to talk about all this sorts of things today with Matthew. So Matthew, welcome. I shall stop talking. Welcome.
No, thank you so much. And I love how you started, what if it fails? It's going to, actually. That's a guarantee.
And that's okay.
The framing, I think this is a big opening, maybe. It's something I was thinking about today. And before I get into it, thank you for having me on. I appreciate you taking the time. And hello to the listeners or the viewers. The framing around failure. So often we build, in my experience, in the work that I'm doing for myself, part of the joy of what I get to do and the work I get to do is I'm experiencing it too. So I'm in practice of my work, which I love. And so this framing around failure, like trying to avoid failure or seeing failure as a bad thing, but like, can we frame failure as learning as opposed to failure? Because these failures give us data, and we need this data in order to improve. So these failures are actually, I heard something where we want to fail as quick as possible. Actually, we want to make the mistakes. We want to do things in as short a period of time to get the most data on what it is we want to accomplish.
And it's also, in business, cheaper to fail sooner. It's cheaper to find out now that your product doesn't work, or maybe it's not what you want to do or something, than it is to spend tens of thousands of pounds on it and investing in it and then find out that it doesn't work. I love this because it's not, I almost don't believe in the word failure. It's learning experiences, like you say. It's things that maybe don't go as you expect or as you hoped it would turn out, but these things aren't failures. But when you come from a world of employment where you're told what to do, when to do it, you're told by your manager at the end of the month how well you've done it, the thing, and you don't have any of the decisions to make. People often think of things in terms of failure. Have I hit my goals for the month? Have I hit my targets and things like that? So I can totally understand why people think that. So yeah, thanks, Matt. That's a great opening line. I'm sure you've got lots more to add.
Yeah. So I think too, and I would love to know your thoughts and your philosophy or your teachings around it. But I know that your ethos is essentially be your own boss, right? Create your, I guess, essentially freedom-based lifestyle. And so when in my experience, where I've been blessed to meet some of the right people, when we first start out, especially online, potentially due to something I'm not sure if your listeners are aware of, is imposter syndrome.
I'm sure they are.
Okay.
we all suffer from that from time to time.
Sure. So that's like the first stage, right? Before even changing your name on Instagram or Facebook or setting out, it's like that first level of imposter syndrome. And part of the work that I like to invite in is acceptance. This is really the first stage of change, is acceptance of what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. And so as opposed to like pushing it away, or like conventionally self-help says affirmate it, doing affirmations, like for example, like I am XYZ, but like underneath, what's under that XYZ? It's like a whole bunch of things you're resisting. And this resistance is going to just keep getting bigger and bigger unless we don't address it. And so I think that first transition, when you're looking to create your own life, or in terms of your audience right now, they're trying to be their own boss, is welcome that in. Let it all come in. So instead of resisting and pushing it away, it's letting that in, and acknowledging it, and letting it run its course. Now there's deeper layers to this, and things that we would have to go into to get through the process of it.
Absolutely. And I think, it's worthwhile saying that even established business owners suffer from imposter syndrome sometimes. So yeah, you guys aren't on your own there who are just starting out, but I love this like sort of confronting it, and with regards to the imposter syndrome, I heard something recently that the definition of an expert is basically this person who knows the most about anything in an average room. And this was a coach that I called Lisa Johnson here in the UK who I heard this from. And I thought, because people hear the word expert, like they're thinking of these feelings like, well, who am I to be selling that? So, or things like something that often comes up is, I'm just starting out. I'm not an expert yet. I'll only charge this much instead of what they should. And actually they are the experts, because whether it's been a hobby for them for some time, or whether they've gone out and maybe retrained or something, or something like that, they actually through that exercise know more about I don't know, whatever it is, baking cookies, or creating floral displays, or being a bookkeeper or an accountant, or whatever it is for them. They know more about that than the person in their office or in an average room. So I love that. So in terms of sort of confronting it, and you talked about confronting it in affirmations and stuff like that, can you sort of delve a little bit deeper into that, and to help people kind of get over this?
Thank you. So what's under, like, we know potentially if we're developed at a certain stage, like we gotta get to the why, right? We can't just hang out on the surface of the how. Like we do certain actions for a reason, but we want to find out why we're doing those actions. And so what happens is we're kind of addressed a lot of times in the act of change, we're trying to address the effect, which has already been caused from a past event. And so at the top, we want to create this action, but we can't, because at the undercurrent, we haven't addressed the cause, the why, and looking into that why. So often what we do is we avoid. And this is where coping mechanisms are developed through trauma, which is okay. If you think about it, think how intelligent our body is and our mind is. Like that creating a coping mechanism takes no effort. Takes no effort, but it takes.
You do it without knowing.
Exactly, it just happens. That's a pretty smart device, whatever got developed in our evolution. But for us that are wanting to evolve to a better version of ourselves, not that we're not okay where we are, but we just would like to experience a deeper sense of ourselves, or a higher evolution of ourselves, or a more fuller version of ourselves. Getting into the why this is happening. So like when we first start out to do something that we've never done before, especially in the front of the eyes of others, like how can we expect to be good at it right away? But like if we don't start, we're never gonna get there. And so what we want to do is, instead of taking these massive jumps, and instead of looking out to see what our peers are doing, or what everyone else is doing, we just get focused on ourselves. And find a step that is big enough to excite us, but small enough that we know we can accomplish that. Let's say that again. We want to take a step that is big enough to excite us, but small enough so that we know we can accomplish it. Because what happens is this thing called momentum. And a lot of times people use momentum in the reverse way we want to use it, which is negatively through avoidance and coping mechanisms, negative thinking, which then creates a momentum downward spiral. But we want to create an upward spiral. We want to switch it going upwards. And so how we do that first is by taking little steps. So I call myself a shallow end learner. I really encourage a lot of people that, in my experience, expect you, especially being in a male around other men. We really encourage each other to just push each other in the deep end, and then if you don't survive, you're weak. And like for me, that's just so harsh. Like I just don't want to be in that kind of environment. I actually thrive in that environment personally, but I don't like to teach that. So I call myself a shallow end learner. Like I like to take people from the shallow end and just a bit further, and just slowly. Next thing you know, you're in the middle part of the pool, And so with this imposter syndrome, it's like, okay, going out and quitting your job right away and just starting up your own business. That's just like, that's what you want to do, but that step is way too big. Okay, what's the step you can take before that? Oh, okay, maybe I could talk to someone that has done it. Is that still scary? Is that too big? Okay, go before that. Okay, maybe I could just watch content from someone that's doing this. Just watch the content. Okay, that probably feels a bit better. And then work from there. Now, stay in that space. There's this thing called, when we're shifting, now this is kind of the key point to all of this, in this change. We need to identify. We need to work at the identity level. So there's 4 levels to this. The surface level is the actions we take. The next level is the thoughts we think. The layer before that is our beliefs. And the ultimate layer is our identity, who we identify with. So our identity is like the temperature in the room. We sit at a natural temperature. So if you think about like where I am, the temperature in the room, let's say, is at a certain temperature, but then obviously in Bali, it gets hot. So then the temperature stat kicks on and keeps the room at a standard temperature. So we all have these temperatures within ourselves naturally, which is our identity. So sometimes this is where imposter syndrome comes in. You're trying to raise your temperature stat and you don't identify with it.
It's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, you'll come right back down to resting temperature. Or even if it gets bad, I don't know if you or the listeners have experienced, but in my experience, even if it's gotten worse, I'll get back up to this like baseline. But the goal is to raise that baseline. And one of the ways to raise that baseline is taking those small steps to changing that identity. And that's really what we want to do here, is start shifting that identity. And this identity can shift in a matter of a quantum moment. I've had a quantum moment shift in my identity. And then I've had a moment where I've decided to change, and the shift didn't happen just recently. A body shift. It took over 18 months for me to get into the body that I'm in today. But I was started in my mind 18 months ago. And so there's a process to all this. And what's beautiful, there's no good nor bad. We're just at where we're at. And then ideally shifting that identity to a place where we want to go. And when we're first shifting, and I don't know if your listeners are too much into energy, but there's this thing we want to do internally, right? This is what we're really playing, is the internal game. And we want to assume the identity and ground down into it. We want to assume the identity and then ground down into it. What often we do is we assume the identity and it scares us and we flight. And we don't stand into the identity. So that's maybe same, for example, I'll give you an example in my situation. People, when I first came to Bali, didn't know my name. They couldn't remember my name. Now, I went through an identity shift. I used to call myself and identify myself as Muzzy.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came to Bali, my real name is Matthew. And for my 20s, I identified with Muzzy. But I don't identify with that character anymore. And it was a nickname and a person I developed and a character I developed. But that character was a person I was when I was drinking and addicted to alcohol and a partier.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer do those things. Not that they're bad nor good. It's just a choice that I've made for myself. But when I first started, people would say like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. What are you?" And I'd be like, "Matt, my name's Matt." And they'd be like, "Hey, Tom, how's it going? Hey, Mark. Hey, Brad." And I'll be
Anything
like,
but Matt.
"Listen, oh, crazy. Like, no one's called me by my name." And I wouldn't correct them on it either. But I was just like, I've never experienced this before. Like, a lot of people aren't remembering my name. But the thing is I didn't identify with Matthew. I didn't identify with Matt. So it's taken some time to identify with Matt. And this is this is transferable to all of us in all these positions. Managerial doesn't just mean entrepreneurial. It's in everything we want to do. And this is why I love this work, is because if we can shift at this level, this is where the magic truly happens.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right in saying that our sort of, caveman brain is there to keep us safe, right? It keeps us in a comfortable place because it knows that's safe, and that's where the saber-toothed tigers aren't going to come and get us because it knows it's safe there. But we still carry that with us now, thousands of years on, and that it's there for a good reason, to keep us safe. It keeps us in a job where we know what we're doing. We know we get a regular paycheck. We know you've got some income coming in, and it's safe. I say that in quotes, safe. But I think in reality, it is really hard for people to shift out of that. So I love this advice of, it's kind of slowly imagining yourself at another level, right? So you identify with being let's say you're becoming a wedding cake maker or something like that, whatever line of work you want to go into, and you sort of imagine yourself being that, right? And then you sort of slowly work up to that, and you slowly shift that baseline up, and before you know it, whether it takes weeks, months, years, however long it is, you are a wedding cake maker. You've left your job. You're an expert. And what I found interesting was, I went through this, as my crowd probably know by now, but over 10 years ago myself, and I experienced these things as well. I was one of these people who I had no idea of pricing. I had no confidence in pricing. I was, I'm just starting out, or I'll only charge this much when I should be charging that much, and I didn't, because my first business was a floristry business, and I didn't class myself as a florist for a while, until I actually left my job and started this business properly, as it were. And now, a few years on, it actually came to a point where somebody, I can't even remember what the conversation was now, but they mentioned that they looked up to me. They looked up to me as a, well, wow, you're they mentioned my business name, and oh, it's great to meet you. I love your work. I really admire you. And I'm thinking, what? This is it's just me. It's just me and my business. And so that was quite a sort of shift for me as well. So
do you remember, so you said you were working at a bank 10 years ago. When you first got this idea, what was that first step you took?
Yeah, well, this is interesting because I find a lot of people in my position do reach this point where they it's either some sort of external life event, like a pandemic or a redundancy or severance, or whatever, or sometimes, like me, they just reach a point where they wake up one day and they're like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And yeah, the financial crash had been going on for a few years at the time when I sort of made this shift, but my department wasn't really affected at the time. As it happens, it was a few months later, but well, you know, that worked well in my favor. But yeah, to answer your question, I just woke up one day and I was like, you know what, this isn't for me. I can't do this. I worked in an IT department of a major bank, and I was like, you know, this isn't for me. I need to do something else. I needed to do something more creative. So I actually set out, my first task was to think, okay, well, what do I want to do? And I was thinking of, okay, well, what, rather than just a job that I fell into over the years, what sort of things did I want to be when I was younger? You know, you go through all of these things, like you want to be an astronaut or whatever, you know, when you were younger. And one of those things for me was to be a florist. And that, you know, I was going through this whole list of things that I wanted to be, and something about that really kind of struck with me. So that was my first task, and I guess the second was to look for local colleges who ran courses in that subject, so I could at least do some training. So yeah, so that was my first.
So your first step is you started researching.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I love that. And you didn't even you didn't quit your job. You didn't do, you know, you didn't take this massive step. You just researched. And that you just stayed where you were. I think the thing too, I don't know if you feel this with your students or your clients, but do sometimes did they kind of, they get kind of an analysis paralysis because they think they have to go do all these things today. Like, I got it now, and so now I have to do it today.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, they get stuck in planning, and they think that another interesting thing is that they feel like they have to have everything sorted before they make a step.
Yes.
As well, which isn't the case.
Well, so this is what's so fascinating about the transition that you're facilitating for your clients. It's a mindset shift. So like, part of the way of living on your terms is also carving a bit of your own path, regardless if you have strategies or if you have even a mentor. Like, this is the difference between corporate and entrepreneurship, is you get the freedom to, but the thing is that freedom is also scary, because conventionally we've been raised in a world where you go to school, then you go to university, and then once you take that training or that course, then you get that exact position. But like with entrepreneurship, you can take a course, but it doesn't mean you're going to get money or provide a service or anything. You've got to kind of, I like to look at it as painting. They provide, so like for your business, Vicky, you're providing the paint, but it's up to them to paint.
Yeah,
They're
absolutely.
painting. And it can be kind of scary at the beginning. Well, what should I paint? Well, what do you want to paint? Like, I don't know. I was told to paint.
You can paint anything you like.
Yeah, it's like, no, I was told to paint smiley faces and nonstop smiley faces. I've been painting smiley faces for the last 7 years. It's like, well, did you ever want to paint that? I'm like, well, smiley faces are nice, but like, okay, what's your favorite animal? It's like, I didn't even think that I could paint my own animal. It's like, oh yeah, well, this is part of it. You can do what you want now. It's like, I can? It's like, we need this permission that we're allowed to do what we want and be rewarded for that as well. And so that's why I love what you're doing, is you're really helping them. There's like a mindset shift.
Hugely, yeah. And I think once you reach that point where you realize it's okay to make my own decisions, you know, I can decide to, you know, if I on a whim one day decide to suddenly create a new product or a new service or you know, you can do that. And you don't need anyone's permission but you. And you know what, if you put it out there and it doesn't quite work, that's okay too. And you know, it goes back to the first point you made, really, about the sort of the fear of failure and what have you. You know, if you put something out there, it doesn't quite work, view it as a learning experience. You know, is it something perhaps you did in launching it? You know, maybe you didn't launch it in the right way, or maybe it's something that people just aren't quite ready for. You know, maybe there's just a tweak that you need to make to make people realize, yeah, this is for them. Or You view it as a learning curve, as you said in your initial point when you first started the interview. And once you reach this point where you realize you're comfortable with making your own decisions, it's really hard to go back. I often say I couldn't go back and work for the man now, and I couldn't be told what to do and when to do it, because I'm so used to being in this natural state of making my own decisions now. So you can shift this, you can shift this mindset, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's also something that I've learned to empathize with. I was working with a client, and I noticed that she was like, yeah, I do this, and I work my corporate job, and then I do this and I do that. And I'm like, wait, what's that? Like, you said, like, I don't know, but what I'm seeing is like, you seem like you kind of mumbled what you did.
Hmm.
And I was like, because you around this entrepreneurial space, do you feel like a little bit guilty that you're working corporate? And she's like, well, yeah, actually I do. I'm like, but do you like it? She's like, honestly, I don't mind it. I like what I'm doing. I don't feel that I need to be an entrepreneur yet. It's not really for me. I'm like, great. That's great. Like, so there's another thing too. It's just, if for the listeners, if you are working a corporate job, and it's not that you have to do this.
Hmm.
It's only if you feel that calling inside yourself, because you need that calling in order to sustain the kind of trenches you're going to go through.
Hugely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, actually. When you're working for yourself, specifically if you're a solopreneur, as the saying goes,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's no one else to tell you what to do. There's no one else to sort of jeer you on and say, come on, you can do this, and help,
Mm-hmm.
because there will be peaks and troughs, good times, bad times. There'll be times where you feel,
Yes.
what the heck have I done here? And
Mm-hmm.
then alternatively, there will be other times when you're on cloud nine and you are
Mm-hmm.
buzzing from something that just happened. So a support network is crucial throughout this
Mm-hmm.
this stage as well. But yeah, that was just to add to that point that you just made. It's a very, very valid point. You need this fire within you. You need to be passionate about what you do in order for this business of yours, this seedling business, to flourish and for it to last a long time. I mean, I certainly couldn't have been in business for 10 years without this fire, this passion inside of me. But this is what I love about side hustlers. They start
Yeah.
these things because of a love of what they do. Whether it might start out as a hobby baking business, or maybe it's just I was speaking to a lady from the bank I used to work at, actually, the other day when I interviewed her, and she now has turned into a coach that helps. She's left that bank now. She's taken her redundancy. She's made this leap recently, and she's now passionate about helping people climb the ladder in the corporate world. She coaches people in that respect. So she that passion will carry her through. And that'll give her business longevity. Absolutely. So yeah, that's a great point, Matt. Definitely.
Yeah. Um, And you mentioned something which was interesting. So I'm connected to a very successful coach that teaches people to productize their knowledge as
Mm-hmm.
coaches. So he helps facilitate uh, taking someone's inner transformation and taking that to market and then productizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And he is one of the guys that is doing the most testing I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like because I'm reverse engineering a lot of what he's doing. I just messaged him today and I was like, hey man, like, do you know your link is not actually doing? He's like, yeah, I'm testing it.
Okay.
So I want to tell an interesting story to your listeners. So I've been researching this copywriter, and he, for the longest time, he's been trying to get this when he was first on his beginning of his journey. So he had some experience selling products through sales copy, and he was testing his audience and getting the language right.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to go launch this coaching program with a sales copy, and he had room for 25 signups, and it was high ticket. And he went to go launch, and crickets, literally no one showed up. And he got disheartened, and he went into a big cycle. Naturally, sometimes this happens on the entrepreneurial journey too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he went down into a cycle, and in that cycle, when he went to the low point of it, he realized, hey, why don't I just change one thing? He changed one word and sold all 25 tickets. Brilliant. On one word. It was one word, and this is so crazy. I'm forgetting the word that he changed from what to what, but I remember the importance of the story. So the thing with failure is maybe we could look at it as testing. And absolutely. So in the process of developing yourself professionally online, we want to test. And so one of the things, and I'll be mindful, because there's a million ways to make $1 million on the internet. You know what I mean? There's not one strategy to do it, but one of the ways that the industry, like I'm in the industry and connected to people here in the network of solopreneurs, and one of the things with the imposter syndrome that we see with coaches that start out is that we think that we need to have a website. We think that we need to have the ads and the funnels and all this stuff. But in actuality, the term that my mentor has coined calls it the business DNA. So this is your distinct natural assets. So you want to marry your distinct natural assets with the market so that you have a product market fit. But the way we design our website, the way we design our funnels, the way we design our content even is we want to use the language of our TA or our target audience. So what happens is a lot of these people invest. I've even seen someone invest $60,000. I heard I was on a call, and this guy invested $60,000 on his product launch. And he's a really smart guy, intelligent. This is the thing too. You can be very intelligent. This guy studied at Harvard, I believe it was, and didn't make any sales through it. But the thing is you could have the best thingamabob, but if no one wants it, it doesn't matter how great it is. It doesn't matter how much time you put in. It doesn't matter if they don't want it, they don't want it. So the joy of this is testing. So getting, and the best way to do it is the ask method. Ask our audience. And so we can get the language, which then if we find the language, we can language our brand around where the problem we're solving. Yeah. And so we just constantly test, as opposed to looking at this as failures. But obviously this is potentially a little bit more advanced. Like if we're talking to the audience that is still in their business or their corporate job and they haven't made the transition yet, this is once you've taken a little bit of that leap.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I could talk a lot about it. This is something we could do a whole other session on, I think, as well. It's something that I teach in my programs as well with my 8P framework. And, we look at that sort of thing and developing all of that. So yeah, it's a huge topic. But yeah,
yes, it is.
In terms of helping people through this this time, if they're thinking, well, who's going to want to buy my cookies or my flowers or whatever, test it. Yeah, like you say, it's cheaper to test that now. And this is something I hear from a lot of experts that I speak to. Test it, and at some point test it on people who aren't your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister. And they're great, of course, initially, but they're always going to tell you stuff you want to hear for the most part. So maybe do something like when I first started out in business, my very first thing was selling to people at work. It was Christmas time, and I did flowers, and so people who at work who knew what I did would order a few for example, table centerpieces or things like this. And then my next step was to dip my toe in the world of retail and and I did a market stall at a local market on a Sunday, and I signed up for that. I actually did that for about a year, as it happens, even after I left my job. But that was my way of testing it to see if I was any good at it, to see if people liked my stuff, to see if I really wanted to do this as well. And yeah, people responded well to it, and that spurred me on. And so it was cheaper to figure that out then, rather than leave my job, spend all of this money on, getting premises or a studio or something to work from, and investing in lots of stock and training, and then figuring out that people didn't want it, or there was a choice that needed to be made. So yeah, I love that. Matt, I'm aware that you have to head away very shortly, and this is something that we're both very passionate about, and something we could speak a long time about. Maybe we could do a part 2 of this sometime.
Sure.
But before we go, could you just let the listeners know where they can find you if they wanted to follow up with you, ask you any questions, or follow you on social media? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can go to mindset.matt on Instagram.
Brilliant.
And then you'll find all the other areas of which I'm doing things, but that's the central point which you can find me.
Awesome. And you have your own podcast too. What's that called?
Yeah, it's cool. I am doing that. Thank you. I'm doing a podcast called Inside Mentors Minds. And it's basically, I am a very, I'm a very eclectic human where I have a lot of flavors to me, and I love human beings, and I love finding out what they did to get them to where they are today. So it's nice to be on the other end of this. But that's why I'm always curious to what you do too, and how I love that you are making this transition and facilitating this work for people in the world. It's so special. It's so rewarding intrinsically, I'm imagining.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. I've kind of gone full circle. Basically I'm using my wealth of experience and knowledge that I've built up over the last 10 years of being in business, and now coaching other people through the same thing and helping their fledgling businesses succeed. So yeah, it's really rewarding to see that happen and see people respond to it. So but yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much again, and hopefully we shall cross paths soon, and hopefully the listeners will really have gained a lot from today. I'm sure they will.
Amazing. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for listening all the way through the podcast. I hope you found that really useful, and I hope you've got some actionable tips and knowledge to implement in your own small business. Please remember to click subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. And also you can catch up with me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.